Hi. Alright, hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're brand new here, my name is Nikki and this is my book nook, and today we are doing my September reading wrap up. Does anyone else feel like September just, I don't know, it was kind of like the longest month but also the shortest month. It was like the first week was really long. Maybe because I was on vacation, maybe because it was a nice little relaxing time. I was in Vermont for the first week of September, fell in love with that state. More than I think I've ever fallen in love with like any place I've been in like such a short amount of time. I was just like living my best life, breathing all that beautiful green mountain air. It was just amazing. And then the last 3 weeks after that, like getting back to work and everything, it just felt like it flew by so fast. And now it's October, which is crazy because we're in full-fledged fall, baby. Like, I love this time of year. October is my favorite month of the year, between Halloween, just like all the cozy vibes, hockey season, don't even get me started. I am so excited. I'm so excited. But before we get into October, we obviously have to talk about the books that I read in September. I had a pretty good reading month in September. I feel like I kind of bounced back from my previous month. There were definitely like a couple of books that I did DNF, like a few that I didn't love, but I also did read several that I really did love. So gonna get into all of that. I read a handful of romances and then a couple of thrillers, so I think I will start first with the thrillers and then we'll get to the romance books. So first up for the thrillers, I read Don't Let Her Stay by Nicholas Sanders, and I really liked this book. It reminded me a lot of The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, if you were a fan of that book, or Verity, just like one of those books that takes place in a house where you have like a guest in the house and it just feels really claustrophobic. It starts to feel like you're being like gaslit and you don't know what is real and what is fake. It was very much one of those stories and it just had me hooked. I read this in one sitting on my plane ride to Vermont actually. So pretty much the story follows this woman that has just recently gotten married. She's in this age gap relationship. This man has had a previous marriage. His wife passed away. He had a daughter from that marriage, but they are sort of estranged at this point now that he's gotten remarried. So they're kind of like starting out their newlywed life. They've recently had a baby and she's having a good time. She's a stay-at-home mom now, but now all of a sudden, out of the blue, because they have had this baby, the husband's daughter from his previous marriage has decided that he would like to re-enter his life, like kind of reconcile their differences because she wants to meet her baby sister. So that daughter comes to stay and she seems nice at first, but right away, as soon as like the husband isn't there or just like when the two of them are alone, she's a little crazy. It's definitely a feeling like The Housemaid, where she's kind of like acting one way in front of the husband and a different way in front of the wife, and like the wife is just not sure how she feels about her, doesn't know if she can trust her. She's kind of coming off a little bit crazy, telling her things, but then like saying something completely different. And then it kind of turns out that she has dropped out of school and now she would like to stay with them. It really works out because the wife has just recently like started working again from home. She could use some childcare help. So the husband is like, yes, like daughter, stay, watch our baby, like babysit for us. And the wife is not super comfortable with that because she doesn't really trust the daughter. And like, just as it goes on, things get crazier and crazier and you were just like so stressed out, don't know who to trust, don't know what's going on, don't know why the daughter randomly showed up, like what her purpose is here. Like, it's just a stress fest, but it was a really good one. And it was one of those where like up until the end, there were multiple plot twists where you just like didn't know what the real story was. And literally up until the final line of the book, you were like, oh my gosh, trying to figure it out. I really liked it. I really like this kind of thriller where it's just like makes your mind work and you just like don't know what to believe. It was just really, really good. So next up, I actually did a book battle reading vlog on my channel, which you can go and watch between these two thrillers that I had been wanting to read that I realized sounded really similar to each other. The first one was Run on Red by Noelle W. Illey, and the second one was Survive the Night by Riley Sager. Both of these books, pretty much the entire story takes place in a car. It is kind of just like a really fast-paced story where people are running from a killer that's on the loose, sort of thing. They have a lot of similarities but also a lot of differences. Run on Red is about two college students that basically are in the car trying to go to this bonfire party in the middle of the night. They live kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I think it was in Idaho, but wherever they were, it's like there's canyons everywhere. So where they're driving, it's like on the edge of a canyon. It's just sketchy, but pretty much like at the very beginning of the book, they realize that someone is following them. And from there on out, it's just like a super fast-paced story of them like trying to get away from these people that are trying to catch them pretty much, and figuring out like who they are and what they want, and just trying to like survive the night in a way, which is funny because that's what this book is called and I compared the two. But Survive the Night was a little bit different. It's actually set in the 90s and it follows this girl that is also in college that has gone through something pretty traumatic recently. Her roommate actually was murdered, and she was murdered by this serial killer that has taken several lives at the school, and she feels a lot of guilt around her being murdered because she feels like it's kind of her fault in a way because she was with her that night and ended up kind of leaving her alone, and she ended up getting taken, and she kind of blames herself for her death. So she kind of wants to like leave college for a while, just like take a step back. So she needs to get a ride home because she doesn't have a car. So she goes to like post a little flyer on this ride board, just very 90s. Everybody trusts everyone. But this guy pretty much says like, hey, I'm going where you're going. It's 6 hours away. And he's like, you can ride with me, we can carpool. So she gets in the car with this man that she doesn't really know, that seemed nice enough whenever she met him. But pretty soon after the car ride starts, things just start not adding up. There's some red flags. A lot of his stories, like what he told her when they met and what he's telling her now, are not quite lining up. She's starting to question if he really is who he says he is, and she's super paranoid because like there's still this serial killer on the loose around here. So it is another just like very, very fast-paced story, and it was so interesting because you just didn't really know what was real in this story, because the girl, she kind of has like PTSD and she's very obsessed with movies, and she has this like thing where she kind of escapes into her mind and she starts like playing out movie scenes in her head, and she thinks it's real, and then she'll like snap out of it and it won't be real. So there were like many parts in this story where you kind of had like an unreliable narrator and you like don't know what the true story is. Just overall really good. Like this was the best thriller I have read in a very long time. I liked Run on Red. It was a quick, easy read, but I liked Survive the Night a whole lot more. So this next book, I wouldn't quite call it a romance, but it's also not quite a thriller either, so I'll just talk about it now. But it was called Vampires, Hearts, and Other Dead Things by Margie Fuston, I think is her name. I loved this book. I saw a TikToker talking about it and I just knew I had to add it to my fall TBR, and I couldn't wait any longer, so I had to give it a try, and I ended up really, really liking it. The concept behind this book was just so different and interesting than anything else I had ever read before. Basically in this story, this girl grew up very close with her father. They really bonded over their love of vampire movies, vampire TV shows, just like anything vampire related, they loved it. And what's really interesting is that 10 years ago in this world, basically it was revealed that vampires are real. This man on live television, you know, revealed that he was a vampire, like stabbed himself, he healed in front of everyone. So it's kind of been like this big controversial thing in the world for the last decade where people believe him or also don't believe him. Like people don't know if vampires are real, but like technically we think they are, whatever. So it's always been like an inside thing between the girl and her father that they are going to go and find a vampire one day. Like they're gonna go on a trip to New Orleans, they're gonna find a vampire, and they're gonna just like have a good like father-daughter kind of moment that way. But now, present day, her father has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and he's been going through treatment, but treatment is not working any longer, so he only has a couple of months to live. And she is absolutely distraught because her father is her best friend. So she pretty much gets this idea that she is going to go to New Orleans, find a vampire, get that vampire to turn her into a vampire so she can go home and turn her dad into a vampire so he won't die from cancer, essentially. So she kind of like sets out on this whole adventure with her guy friend from childhood to go to New Orleans and try to hunt down a vampire, and it's just so interesting. She ends up kind of like getting into the vampire world, finding this vampire, and he's kind of like wants her to convince him that she should become a vampire. Like, why do you want this? Do you really know what you want? Prove to me that you know, love life enough to live it forever. It was just really, really interesting, and it's one of those books that just really makes you think about life and the purpose of it, and makes you like, you know, appreciate the time you're given. Like there was just a lot to it. It was very fun and it was very cozy, but it also was like pretty emotional. It was a little bit of a tearjerker. I just liked that it was a very different kind of concept, total like Halloween vibes. Also, one thing I really loved about it was every single chapter started out with a quote from a vampire TV show or movie. So if you're a Vampire Diaries fan and an Originals fan, there's so many references to Vampire Diaries throughout this story. Like I actually listened to the audiobook of it, and it was so fun because when you would get to like the new chapters, the narrator would read the quote, and like Vampire Diaries quotes, like I just know them, right? Like I could already tell like if it was a couple words in, I was like, oh, I know the whole quote. Like it was just really fun. So if you're like a true lover of vampire fiction, you would really like this book. So next up, I read The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I've been talking about this book for a long time now on my channel because it's been one of my most highly anticipated reads of this year. Finally read it. I actually, if you watched my reading vlog where I read rom-coms for a weekend, this was a part of that. I had very high expectations for this because I loved The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, but this one just like didn't end up being my favorite. Pretty much the story follows this girl that grew up very close to her aunt. Her aunt was very eccentric. She lived in this apartment in New York City, and she always told the girl in this story that her apartment was magical, that it could transport her to this place that was 7 years ago, and that, you know, so the girl always thought it was kind of just like her aunt, you know, being funny, just like telling her stories. But now her aunt has passed away. She has moved into her aunt's apartment, and she is now experiencing this magic. She's walked into her apartment and it is the same but different. It's 7 years in the past, and there is this guy in the apartment, and they kind of have this like whirlwind insta love sort of romance. But what makes it difficult is that she never knows like if her apartment is going to be her actual apartment or the apartment 7 years ago. So she keeps like going back to him, disappearing, whatever, and she doesn't know where to find him present day because like she doesn't know where he's going to be in the future, and she can't bring this up to him because obviously he doesn't know where he's going to be 7 years in the future. So the concept behind it was really interesting. It was kind of very like Back to the Future-esque, where you just like, you're like, how does this affect the timeline? Like, how do I tell you this when you don't know this? Like, is this going to mess up like the time-space continuum? Like, there were a lot of like complicated aspects to it like that. But yeah, I will say she ends up like crossing paths with this guy present day, and he remembers her, but she doesn't know what all he remembers of her because she hasn't experienced it all yet. Like, there were a lot of like nuances to it, and there were parts of this book that I really did like. Like, I think the concept was really good, but the actual romance of it, I just don't think was like executed super well. I just didn't feel it, you know how sometimes you read a romance book and you were just like, oh my god, you could feel the love coming off the pages, like the intense chemistry, like, oh, this couple, you're just like rooting for them. But this was one of those stories that was just very kind of like insta-lovey, and I didn't really understand like the deep, immense connection they had. I didn't feel like they had like a super big bonding moment or conversation. It just kind of felt like they met and instantly were in love with each other, and then at the end it's supposed to be like, okay, woo, like we're happy, you know what I mean? So I liked it, but I didn't love it. Okay girls, listen up. It has been a hot minute since I read a spicy, raunchy, dirty, like make my toes curl kind of romance, and this book it certainly did that for me. It awoken, can I speak English? Something in me that hasn't been there in a hot minute, and it was For the Fans by Nyla K. This is an MM romance between two guys. Guys, I gotta be honest, I'm like really into MM romance. Like, I might get on a kick with it because something about it, like when it's done right, it's just so good. And this one, just in general, Nyla K, she's just so good. But this story is actually about two stepbrothers, so it's a very taboo little moment. Basically, these boys end up becoming stepbrothers because their parents get married whenever they are in high school, and they could not be more different from each other. The one brother is like a football player. He's going to Boston College on a scholarship, and he's going to end up in the NFL. He's so good. And the other brother is like very artsy, kind of like a pothead, just like doesn't really have much of a direction in life. He's very like hot and all of that, but he's just not, you know, they don't have like the same interests or the same friend groups, whatever, and they just do not get along. Like, they just butt heads so badly, can't stand each other, and they end up actually going to the same college together, and pretty much their parents kind of lose all their money. Their dad like has a business issue, and they lose all their money whenever they go to college. So now the both of them are just like faced with this situation where they have to find a way to come up with money to stay in school, or they're gonna have to like move home or drop out or whatever. Like, their parents aren't able to help them anymore. So out of desperation, one of the brothers ends up starting an OnlyFans account because his really good friend has an OnlyFans account and she's like killing it on there. So he starts doing like solo OnlyFans and ends up doing a collab with his girlfriend where she wants to do like a threesome because someone requested it. They're at a party. The other brother ends up getting like roped into it. Long story short, it ends up like evolving where everybody is like so obsessed with the two guys because they're like, there's so much tension between them. They're like arguing the entire time, like while they're filming, you know, this scene or whatever, and they're like literally angry, hate each other, don't want to be there, but they desperately need the money. Like, that's why they're filming this threesome, and everyone ends up just like wanting the guys. They're like, get rid of the girls, like get rid of the girl, we don't need her, we want stuff of you guys. And they both hate each other, like do not want to do this, but also like they made more money from that one video in 15 minutes of their time than they could make in any other job, and like they are desperate to stay in school, like they need this. So they end up starting an OnlyFans of just the two of them, and they like blur their faces, whatever, but they are filming these videos, and it just like starts out where there's just so much tension because they're just like, they hate each other, but then, you know, they're just doing everything for the fans. That's like why it's called that, because it's like, oh, it's just for the fans, like we'll try this, like well, it keeps like going up a level and up a level, and then before you know it, they're definitely both very much enjoying it. And oh my god, I'm gonna be honest, like Nyla K's books, at least I think this is the third book of hers that I've read, she doesn't have like, there's usually not a lot to her stories, right? Like there's not a lot of plot going on, and her books are very long. This was like a 775 page book, so much longer than it needed to be, but her spice is next level insane, like off the wall. Like there's so much of it, and every scene is so different. I don't know how she comes up with all of it. But long story short, if you just want a real spicy book, a taboo book, something a little bit different, a little scandalous, definitely check this out. It's on Kindle Unlimited. It was a good time. It took me a little while to get through because like I said, it was really long, but it was definitely a good time. That is all I will say. And the last book, I'm actually still reading it. I have a tiny little bit of it left. It is called Off the Grid by Kay Bromberg. If you guys are not aware, I am fully in my Formula One era. I am so obsessed. I've held off for so long. I've been on the periphery. I've been following all the drivers, but now I watched Drive to Survive, and like here we are. I've watched the last like 5 races with my friends, and I'm just like, another thing to fill up my brain capacity with. I'm so obsessed. I'm so obsessed. So I've been looking for Formula One books, and this one came up on my TikTok, and I'm really liking it. I tried the Dirty Air series by Lauren Asher. I read the first book. I did not like it at all. So I've been looking for other Formula One books, and I would love to hear more recommendations from you guys, but I really liked this one. I could tell the author was like super educated on Formula One. I felt like I was like learning so much as I was reading it. She was just very detailed. It felt very authentic. I love when a sport, like a sports romance, actually really focuses on the sport and has like a lot of that in there, and I just feel like it makes it feel a lot more real. So pretty much the concept behind this story is this girl's family is like the Moretti family, and they have like this massive empire. It started out like they're an Italian family. It started out with an olive oil empire. That's where they got like all their money, but now they own all these other businesses, one of them being an F1 team. So she has always been a part of it growing up, but the last few years she's been in college, and she's kind of gotten out of it, isn't really paying attention to Formula One anymore. She's graduated with her marketing degree. In the last year or two, she's been working for the family's olive oil company, but now her father has been diagnosed with an illness. He doesn't have like, you know, he's gonna pass away in the next few years essentially. So he kind of really wants her to like get more involved with their F1 team. He wants her to be the one to eventually run it, take over. So he's like, I would love if you could come and like be a part of it while I'm still here, and you can like learn the ropes, whatever. So she's like hesitant, it's like, I'll think about it, whatever. She ends up going to a bar and having this run-in with this guy that just like, she's very attracted to him, but it just doesn't go well. He's a total like jerk to her, and it's a whole big dramatic situation. But they leave, and then she ends up accepting the role from her dad, decides she's going to work for the F1 team, and then simultaneously while this is going on, a driver on their team ends up getting injured, so they have to pull up a driver from Formula 2, and lo and behold, that driver that gets pulled up from Formula 2 is this guy that she had a run-in with at the bar. We love it. We love it. I'm so here for it. I love it. I love it because he doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know who he is when they see each other. That moment where you're like, oh shit, like what have we done here? And the driver has like a whole story to him too, because his dad was a Formula One driver and he actually passed away in an accident. So he has like this kind of chip on his shoulder, like he really wants to do well, but he's also just kind of like an arrogant rich kid, you know, whatever. Like there's a lot to it, but it was a good story. I liked it a lot more than Dirty Air. It felt like it had a lot more depth to it. The story was a lot more interesting. I'm not totally done with it yet, but so far I really like it, and it's going to be a 4-book series, so very intrigued. Definitely, if you're into Formula One, would say to check it out. But yeah, guys, those are all of the books that I sort of finished for this month. I did read 50% of Ghosted by J.M. Darhauer, and I had to DNF it. I was so disappointed because I've been wanting to read this book for so long now. It sounded so up my alley. It's a second chance romance between this couple that like had a really bad, like met in high school, had a really bad falling out, and it has like multiple like past and present timelines. That is totally my thing, but I didn't realize when I started the story that it's actually a second chance romance, but the couple has a kid together, and I don't like kids in my romance. Like, I don't want to say that's the only reason I stopped it, because in all honesty, it was just really kind of slow and boring for me, and it confused me a little bit because pretty much, like I said, the guy and the girl, they met in high school, and then the guy now, present day, is like a really famous actor, but he's now like, he's really been struggling with like alcohol addiction, and so he wants to like come home, get back to his roots. Like, he wants a relationship with his daughter, he wants this girl back, like it's always been her for him, but she just like doesn't trust him, and the whole story you're kind of trying to figure out like why they went their separate ways. And to be honest, I didn't even get to that point because it was just going so slow for me, and the format to me was a little confusing because the present day chapters, it would swap back and forth between him and her, but then there were these random like journal entries thrown in there which served as like the past timeline, and it was written from the girl's journal, but it was just written in a very odd way where it was like kind of third person, and it was like she was writing the journal entries to the guy. So it would be like, you pulled up at school and you spotted her across the room and she looked pretty and you wanted her, but she looks away from you. Like, it was kind of, I don't know why, it was just like kind of confusing for me to understand. And it was just one of those books where I spent like a week and a half getting through 50% of it, and it just like shouldn't take me that long. I just was not invested. Every time I picked it up, I was kind of like, ugh, like I'd read one chapter and be like, okay, I want to put it down now. You know, it was just one of those situations. So I DNF'd it. I don't know. But yeah, guys, those are all the books that I read in the month of September. If you read any of these books, I would love to hear all your thoughts down below. If you read any other books that you absolutely loved, think I might like, that I should check out, especially F1 books, guys, I'm serious. Give me recommendations. But yeah, guys, that is it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.